Morant with a running start. Elevate! Oh, it dunks! Oh, my goodness!
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now a three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant! Oh, he hit it! John Morant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. Today's episode will probably be rather short, but there's a few things we can talk about. There have been highlight clips of Morant and Zach Edey working out. Plus, there's an update about the Bally Sports situation as it relates to the Grizzlies games. Plus, Ziaire Williams gave an interview about being traded. So we'll hit all that stuff and a little bit more. Before we do, I just want to tell you about Underdog Fantasy and their upcoming promo for the NFL season. You knew they would give you a good promo for the start of football, and they have. Right now, new customers, if you sign up with my promo code FBBF, or if you click the link in this episode's description, Underdog will now match your opening deposit up to $1,000. $1,000 in bonus cash for new users. Plus, you get a free pick. So, if you ever wanted to try Underdog Fantasy, now is the time. I've been playing it for years. It's a lot of fun. It's totally legal in Tennessee and in most states. So if you want to play some highers or lowers or do best ball drafts or whatever with Underdog, sign up now using my promo code FBBF, and they will match your opening deposit up to $1,000. All right, let's hit some of this smaller Grizzlies news. I think that maybe the most exciting thing was just seeing some clips of Zach Edey working out with Morant. They are working out at Southern Methodist University. Ja's video team posted some of the clips on social media to build some excitement. We saw a little pick and roll action between Ja and the big man, and then also Ja and Edey trading three-point bombs. So let's get excited about the Zach Edey, Morant three-point assault. I mean, this is not actually news, but it's fun, and we're in the deep offseason where there's no real news coming out, so we enjoy the little morsel they gave us there. Now, there is actually some rather important news about the Grizzlies, and that has to do with their television situation. Right now, the Grizzlies, of course, do not have a television partner for their local broadcasts, and previous reports had come out saying Bally's, who's carried the Grizzlies for the last several seasons, was interested in dropping the Memphis Grizzlies. They were going to try to drop several teams. I believe they were dropping the Thunder and the Mavericks and the Pelicans and the Grizzlies. Well, the latest news and the latest proposal from Diamond Sports Group, the company that owns Bally's, is that the Grizzlies will be included. The Grizzlies were one of 13 teams under the restructuring settlement that they've proposed that would have their games on Bally's. This is a change from what we heard before. Bally's did go ahead and sever the relationship, or they've proposed this and they need a judge to sign off on it. They've severed the relationship with the Pelicans, the Mavericks. They say there's a mutual agreement there that they both want to go their own separate ways, but the Grizzlies got added back to Bally's. So there is an expectation that this season the Grizzlies games will be back on Bally's. A lot of that has to do with Bally's and Comcast/Xfinity working out their issues. Now that Bally Sports is back on Xfinity and available to cable customers, that has helped them apparently in their bankruptcy negotiations or their bankruptcy proceedings. And it looks like the Grizzlies will be back on Bally's. Reading between the lines here, or just making some wild guesses as I monitor this situation, my feeling is the Grizzlies could have been like, hey, we would love to come back. Whatever you can give us is fine. Because maybe they didn't have a better option going forward. And we've talked about the literal financial ramifications, about how NBA teams receive a large chunk of their revenue from their local television partners. And a lot of those revenues, because of the bankruptcy proceedings, were going to be down. There's going to be a pretty significant slash in the amount of money received. But I'm guessing maybe when the Grizzlies weighed their options or looked at trying to self-broadcast the games, that they still couldn't recoup the amount of money that they would get from a reduced fee from Bally's. This is just my guess, but I'm feeling like that's probably what could have occurred. Now, in the reports about all this stuff that Awful Announcing had and that ESPN had, one thing that seemed ominous for consumers is this statement that the bankruptcy proceedings could stretch into the season. That seems not great. I mean, I've been told that Grizzlies games are going to be on TV. Don't worry about it. But when I see that this thing might not be resolved like until after preseason occurs, I'm worried. Like, oh, well, am I going to be allowed to watch preseason games? Are they going to work this out so we can actually get everything broadcast? I assume the NBA is going to step in and make sure that games are broadcast and they are carried on League Pass at the very least, but I don't know. But the update is the Grizzlies are apparently back in line to be carried on Bally Sports for the 2024-2025 season. What happens after that? Who knows? But that is the latest update. And speaking of preseason, I didn't really talk about this on the schedule release episode. The Grizzlies preseason schedule is, of course, out. Their first preseason game is going to be on October 7th. That's a Monday. They play on the road at Dallas. Their first home preseason game is Thursday, October 10th against the Hornets. Then they play road games against the Bulls and Pacers on the 12th and 14th. And then they return home for just their second home preseason game, but their final preseason game will be against the Miami Heat on Friday, October 18th. And then, of course, they kick off the season the following Wednesday, October 23rd, with that road game against the Jazz. Now, something fun I saw on social media, Tommy Beer, who covers the Knicks, was posting about players in their teens in NBA history, like who has the most points ever. Like the most points ever scored by a teenager in the NBA is LeBron James. Kobe Bryant has the second most points. This is, again, points scored before a guy turns 20. So LeBron's first, Kobe is second, Carmelo's third, Kevin Durant is fourth. Like right there, that's a very epic top four. The top eight, still very, very good. Anthony Edwards is fifth, Dwight Howard is sixth, Luka Doncic is seventh, Devin Booker is eighth. Now, the reason I'm telling you about this is because of Gigi Jackson. Gigi Jackson last season scored 699 points for the Grizzlies. Gigi Jackson, of course, scored a lot of points because the Grizzlies were bad. It was a direct result of tanking. But Gigi had some huge games last year. He scored 30 or more 4 different times. Of course, he had 44 points in the season finale. Did they lose all those games? Of course they did. Yes. But Gigi Jackson right now, with his 699 points in his career, he has the 34th most points for a teenager in NBA history, and the Grizzlies have 27 regular season games until Gigi turns 20 in December. So I think now I'm looking at it, wondering how high can Gigi Jackson climb up the all-time points scored standings for teenagers. I think maybe we're all guessing he could average 10 points per game, maybe. I mean, he's probably going to be like 9th or 10th on the team in minutes played when the whole team is healthy. Fingers crossed the whole team's going to be healthy at the start of the season. But let's say Gigi averages 10 points per game. He plays in 25 of the 27 games before he turns 20. That would move him just outside the top 10 of the ranking of most points scored by a teenager. Now, I read the top 8 to you. Very, very impressive. Number 9, Jabari Smith Jr. Number 10, and the reason why that Knicks guy was tweeting this is Kevin Knox. Kevin Knox, surprisingly, has the 10th most points ever scored in NBA history by a teenager. Kevin Knox is not in the NBA currently, although he had a very good summer league. Maybe he'll end up somewhere. I think he's only 24 years old. But If Gigi Jackson scores 10 points a game, plays 25 games, that's 250 points, he would then raise his career scoring total to 949 points. That would move him past Tracy McGrady, who has the 11th most points as a teenager, and just be right behind Kevin Knox with the 10th most. If Gigi averages, let's say, 12 points per game, well, now we're talking about him having 999 points. And then he would move past Kevin Knox and be just short of Jabari Smith Jr. I don't really anticipate him scoring much more than that. I mean, maybe you think he could match what he did last year, where it was 14.6 points per game. I don't think there's any way that happens while the team is fully healthy. By the way, if you want him to catch like Luka Doncic and to move into this 6th or 7th most points all time for a teenager, he would need to average 20 points per game in the first 27 games for any chance for that to happen. I don't think it's likely. Now, the Grizzlies, their roster, we think is pretty set as I change gears. They still have Mamadi Diakete on their roster as a 15th guy, and it would probably help the Grizzlies to maybe get a better player there. I was eyeing Nasir Little, who was just waived by the Suns. Nasir did not help the Suns very much. They also decided they didn't want to pay all the luxury tax involved in keeping his salary around, so they stretched Nasir Little. I think Nasir Little would be a nice pickup for the Grizzlies. The issue being, of course, the Grizzlies are still very, very close to the luxury tax line, so they probably could not add Nasir Little unless they found someone to take Diakete or somebody else like John Conchar. But all of this talk, even when I think about the Grizzlies, maybe considering adding a different player, and I think about the Suns cutting their luxury tax bill, this brings me back to the luxury tax situation that the Grizzlies have been in that I've talked about a lot on the show. And I think some of the specific numbers are very, very interesting. And we got an update on them, or at least I saw Bobby Marks let me know what they were exactly. And I think they are illuminating, especially when you consider all the television stuff the Grizzlies are going through. And if we think about the Grizzlies losing their TV revenue, their local TV revenue, let's say their local TV revenue from Bally's drops by $10 or $15 million or more this season. I'm basing those figures on some Forbes articles and a Sports Business Journal article talking about a lot of NBA teams were getting between 30 and 40 million from their TV deals, and this bankruptcy restructuring is going to be like a massive cut, like a 30% cut in a lot of situations. So let's just guess or assume the Grizzlies lose $10 to $15 million in television revenue. Right now, when you look at the luxury tax distributions, the money going out to the teams not paying luxury tax, right now, according to Bobby Marks, there are 17 teams not paying luxury tax. 13 teams in the tax. It's a lot. And because of that, right now, the luxury tax distribution payment, which is the money received from all the non-tax paying teams, it would be $18 million per team. Now, that number's going to go down because currently the Pelicans are a couple million into the luxury tax. They're going to get out. Also, the Clippers and the Warriors, they're both, I think, like 5 million into the luxury tax. I think they're trying to reset the repeater clock, so I think they're going to be motivated to also get out of the tax. And once other teams get out of the tax, well, then now the amount of money that you're splitting up goes to more teams. Instead of being divided by 17, it could be divided by 18 or 20. So not only does the pool of money decrease, the number of teams dividing that pool of money increases. So it's not going to be $18 million. But when you think about the Grizzlies' specific situation, again, I think it's illuminating. We're like, oh, what if they lose $10 million in local television revenue, and then just by going into the tax, they lose like $15 million in luxury tax distribution payments. And then you understand if it comes down to a situation where it's like, would you rather have Zaire Williams or $15 million? Where you could easily imagine Robert Parra being like, I will take $15 million. And I talked about this some on Fast Break Breakfast this week. Sorry to repeat that. But also, I don't think it's that clear cut. Like, that isn't the actual decision. The real decision is something like, hey, we could go into the tax to pick up a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith. And we think adding Dorian Finney-Smith will maybe add 2 wins to our team this year. It could increase our odds of making the playoffs by 5%, maybe increase our odds of winning a playoff series by 5%. Is that worth $15 million to you? And I think Robert Pera right now is saying, no, it is not. I would rather keep my $15 million. And so I understand it. I get it. But that also goes back to the ownership being the biggest competitive advantage you can have. Like, if you want to really compete and maximize your chances, sometimes you got to turn down a $15 million check. Like right now, the Timberwolves, not a big market team. The Timberwolves are in line to pay $100 million in luxury tax. Robert Pera has more money than Mark Lowry, Alex Rodriguez, and Glenn Taylor combined. But currently, the Timberwolves are saying, we're going to pay the luxury tax. And of course, the Grizzlies could still, and Zach Kleiman maintains they will pay the luxury tax when they need to. But I thought those numbers were interesting. Looking at, hey, right now, 13 teams in the tax, so it's just 17 teams splitting up this huge pile of money, currently slated to be $18 million per team. But of course, that number is going to go down once other teams dodge the tax. Now, let's wrap up with just a couple of little fun things. Ja Morant, he has a 90 overall rating in 2K. Congratulations. The comeback is fully complete. And finally, Zaire Williams was interviewed by Hoops Hype. Zaire says getting traded did not catch him off guard because Zach Kleiman let him know that something was going to be going down. Zaire says he's happy for the opportunity he's going to have in Brooklyn and grateful for what he experienced in Memphis. When asked about his offseason focus, Zaire says he's mainly working on his body. He kept saying in this interview that availability is the best ability. And Zaire says he, quote, had a nasty little back injury last year. He said he was on bed rest for 2 weeks during the season last year, had to have people bring him food. He couldn't get up. Zaire also said the 5 best players in the NBA were Ja Morant, Luka Doncic, Giannis, Kevin Durant, and Nikola Jokic. So good stuff from Zaire Williams there. And with that, I think that's all we need for today. One thing about being an independent podcaster is I'm not going to podcast if there's nothing to talk about. We're still in the off season. No Grizzlies news at all, really, outside of the television situation, which I find interesting. If you're in the Nashville, Tennessee area, I will let you know that the Grizzlies are doing their Grizzlies Caravan coming to town on September 14th at the Sounds, the Nashville Sounds game. I will be there. If you're a Grits and Grinds listener and you can prove it, there's a good chance I give you a Vince Williams Jr. rookie card. So come out and say hi on September 14th at the Nashville Sounds game. If you want to support my program, you want to play fantasy basketball with me this year, you want to get access to bonus content, well, come on over to patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Sign up over there for $5 a month. You get access to bonus content. You can join my listener Slack channel. You can play fantasy basketball with me when the time comes. Patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. With that, hope you have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.